Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. Thanks for tuning in. If you could do the YouTube things, hit like, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this out if you find it helpful. All right, so a couple days ago, I asked for some questions doing an AMA, and I got some good ones, so let's go through them. First one from Frog Feather, great username. Where in the U.S. will the Russians bomb first? Once this cat and mouse BS comes to a head, will the people playing games with all our lives ever be held accountable, or will it continue to be wash, rinse, repeat method of living? Okay, so your first question, where will Russians bomb first? I don't know. Alaska's closest to Russia, but good rule of thumb, people have nuclear deterrence, including the United States. The farther it has to fly, the more likely you are to be able to deter it. But I don't think it's a given that Russia is going to play around with the United States in this capacity. Why? Because we have a gun and they have a knife. That's pretty much what it comes down to. We're a much more powerful military. Yes, nuclear weapons. They do have nuclear weapons, and I think there are some games being played on the international scale that are really dangerous. But I don't think it's a given that Russia's going to want to play that game. Second question, will people playing games with our lives ever be held accountable? Well, who holds them accountable? The people, right? I think we have lived in a world in the United States and in most Western democracies where it's been so good for so long. And so if people flip on their light switch and their lights work, they go to work and they can pay their bills and they can somewhat live a good life from going to work, what is there to complain about? And I think that is going to change. Not all of it, but just look at Europe. You might turn on your light switch and it might not work this winter. You might turn on your heat and it might not work this winter. Or it might work, but it'll be 20 times what it was the year before. So all of your disposable income is going to heating your home. That is a drastic drop in the standard of living. So I think people get held accountable when people in charge get held accountable when the people in the country get pissed. Because your average person doesn't understand, which is kind of part of the goal of this channel, is to educate myself and others on what's going on. But they don't understand, gas is $10 a gallon, the groceries are going up 100% a year. They may not understand why. They know that it's happening, though, and they're really pissed, and they want it to end. So usually that anger comes in the form of the voting booth. But if a new regime comes in and can't fix the problem as well, Democrat, Republican, vote in a Republican, they can't fix it. Then people start to ask questions, start to educate themselves. So to answer your question, if it gets bad enough, I think people will be held accountable because people will get pissed. Maybe not legally, but they'll get voted out of office, all that jazz. At least that's my hope. Second question from King Jehu Khan II. Did I pronounce that correctly? Could a Navy P-3 or other kind of sub-hunter be used to destroy, sabotage Nord Stream 1 and 2 and the U.S. stealth technology such that we could have a SEAL team to do that sabotage of Nord Stream 1? Or my money, our ally on other democracies in the Middle East who did it. All speculation, including for me, all speculation, but I think if we're going to speculate on it, I think who has the feasibility, capability, and motive to do it. That's a good way, that's how detectives solve crimes. And that applies to America. That applies to a bunch of other countries as well. Obviously, if you didn't know, you don't have to be in the area. You can drop a mine and then detonate it from a distance. But America's not above false flags. We've done it before. And Could we be doing it again? I don't know. Again, speculation. But I like to use Occam's razor. What takes the least amount of assumptions? And America's high up on the list of people who could have done this, or countries that could have done this, but again, all speculation. And who knows? Who knows? It's crazy, though. That's all I know. All right, third question from Princess Consuela Banana Hammock, my favorite username. What are the talks at the water cooler about the pipeline? There's not much. Not where I work. How much time does the military give you if war was declared? It depends on where you work, but there's plans in place for all contingencies around the world. That's all I can say about that. So, yeah, that's all I can say. Which central bank pivots next? And finally, on a scale of The Road, which is a movie, and Little House on the Prairie, how bad are things going to get? So I'm an optimist. I hope they don't get that bad. But as far as central banks who pivot, the way I think about this is as soon as a central bank pivots, they are essentially just putting the death nail in the coffin of their currency. And if all central banks around the world are devaluing their currency at the same time, that is a unique thing in history. That has not happened before, where you have all these countries who are in massive amounts of debt at the same time. And no one, typically what happens in a country is people run to the dollar. If you look at Venezuela, if you look at Turkey, if you look at Argentina, when their country's currency is failing, they run to the dollar. And I think that's still going to happen, but then the dollar will be the last one to fail. So when it comes to central banks that matter, pivoting, China and the EU. You can't get a lot of reliable information out of China, so even if they do pivot, we wouldn't potentially know. But the EU is in this unique position where they need energy, and you've got Germany who's wanting to hand out stimmy checks, and I think the EU is going to have to pivot this winter, sooner rather than later. And it has a systemic risk where one central bank pivots. It's just like the banks that failed in 2008. One bank failed and it had debt with another bank, so that bank's going to fail. Central banks are kind of the same way. So I think it's going to be the EU next. And as far as how bad it's going to get, I am an optimist, maybe a realist. I think we tend to think it will get worse than it will. Like, our tendency is to look at the worst case scenario to kind of protect ourselves. I think it's going to get bad. But my hope is that governments get out of the way. That's the biggest weight on this current. That's the biggest thing that's holding human flourishing back, in my opinion, is the government is just a parasite sucking off of everyone. And since they have so much debt, they keep sucking more and more blood out. But if you allow the free market to work and human ingenuity, I think we have a brighter future ahead. I hope that we have a new system that comes along that kind of works in parallel to this crappy system we have now, monetarily speaking. And people just are slowly jumping off the boat, going to this new system. And by the time the transition needs to happen, most people have already transitioned. Meaning by the time the dollar, just no one wants it. No one's been using it for a while anyways. That's an optimistic view. I do think if it happens really quickly, like hyperinflation, it will get real bad. I don't think it's going to be Mad Max, but there will be a lot of uncertainty, tons of civil unrest in highly populated areas, etc. All right, next question from Extra Extra. What is your prediction for November and who bombed the pipelines? as I was sitting in the presidential brief, he did tell me, but I'm not allowed to tell you. Just kidding. I don't know. I don't know who bombed the pipelines, but I do like to think about it like, detectives think about crimes. Who done it? So who has the motivation? Who has the capability and feasibility to do it? And that at least narrow it down for us. My prediction for November, I predict nothing changes. Some Republicans who are in Congress right now have talked about cutting spending from Social Security. And you see these political ads, it's like, this guy wants to cut Social Security. I don't think they do a good job of explaining what the problem is, meaning we don't have money anymore as a country. And so we'll give you your Social Security check, it'll just buy half as much, or we can cut government spending. So I think Republicans are going to win in November. Do I think anything will change as far as government spending? Hasn't happened in the past. Republicans have spent just as much as Democrats. But if we have people in there who are fiscally responsible and want to cut government spending, that's the key. Again, they're the parasite that's sucking off the economy. So if regulations are rolled back, free market's allowed to work, and you cut government spending drastically, things could potentially change. Do I think that's going to happen? Do people like cutting the program that they like? Like everyone has this pet program that they like. If you're on the right or left, you're like, I like Social Security, I like welfare, I like the VA benefit, I like whatever it is that you like. I like military spending. And so a politician comes along and says, we want to cut your favorite program. Just most people don't vote for them. That's just the way it works. I wish we had politicians who could explain things to people like, hey, we got a problem. Here's the math. You tell me how to fix it. Because the only way to fix it is to cut government spending. We'll keep printing the money if you want, but you're just going to get half as much. But politicians don't do that. Maybe because they don't even know. Okay, and then I got one more question here from Lynn Jacobs, Music and Videos. What do you think the possibility of silver being nationalized? If you mean used as a currency, here's my thought pattern for currencies of the future. What is our way? So this fiat system, every fiat system in history has failed. So we got a pretty good track record to know it's going to fail. Okay, especially when you get to the levels of debt to GDP that we have, right? So it's going to fail. When? I can't say, but it's going to fail. So if our government comes in and says, hey guys, sorry about that whole dollar thing and printing too much of it, but now we have this new thing that we're going to use as a currency, and it's backed by silver or gold. Who's to say that they wouldn't do exactly what they did before, which is print more than they had? Because remember, they had gold in Fort Knox or wherever, and they printed more dollars than they had gold in them. Countries went to redeem their dollars for gold, and we didn't give it to them. We didn't give them the gold. We said, sorry, closing the gold window. Maybe. So, would they do the same thing with silver? Yeah, I think eventually they would. So, my question to everybody, and this is why I like Bitcoin. I believe that dollars or currency should be separated from the government, because that easy button of printing to gain votes, everyone will use. History has shown us that politicians will buy votes every single time. Okay, given enough time, it'll eventually fail because politicians print to buy votes. That's just the way it is. It's the easy button. So what is something that is outside government control and that can't be devalued and keeps governments in check? Some would say silver, or gold, but the reason we use paper currency backed by silver or gold is because it's not really transportable very easily. And in a modern economy where people are buying and selling things, you have to rely on a centralized holder, an issuer of paper notes backed by gold in that society, unfortunately. And so it opens it up, since it's centralized control, it opens it up to being devalued just like it was before. So what is something that they cannot devalue and it's outside government control? That's Bitcoin. There could be another answer, and I'm open to hearing other options, but the only one I've seen that is outside government control is Bitcoin. I always tell people, if you don't know, if you look at Bitcoin and you hear the word Bitcoin, you go, magic internet money, sounds really dumb. I totally get that sentiment because I was once there. I read this book called The Bitcoin Standard. I started digging into what Bitcoin was, and it changed my mind big time. So I always tell people, educate yourself on it before you say, magic internet money, nice try. I'm not falling for that because I get the sentiment, but you should educate yourself on it, and then maybe you think it's stupid, maybe you don't. But that's the only solution I've seen that is outside government control. So I think that was your question as far as nationalizing silver and making it a currency. If that wasn't, ask again in a different way, because that's what I thought you meant. Anyways, that's it for the questions today. Let me know what you think about this stuff in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.